Live. All right, welcome to the House Judiciary Committee this Tuesday afternoon, May 20th. And we are going to be looking at H346, a bill related to towing and abandoned vehicles, stolen vehicles. And we're going to start with a walkthrough by Legislative Counsel. Damon, if you could join us. And good to have you back. When's the last time you've been in here?
I don't think I've been in here this session.
Not this session, no. Oh, so
it's great to be back. A little bit of an unexpected end of session treat for me. So last week I was like, all right, just motor vehicle bill to go and a house vote on the transportation bill conference committee report. And then out of the blue,
time on our hands. We have to fill the time with something. So,
well,
yes,
I appreciate your work ethic. So, now remind me, since I haven't been in here in a while, do you like to have the bill on the screen behind me?
Why don't you do that so that the witnesses who are zooming in, just in case they don't have the bill, they'll be able to see it.
I'll join the meeting here. So while I am joining the meeting, for the record, I'm Damian Leonard from the Office of Legislative Counsel. We're going to look at H346 as introduced. I will go over things relatively quickly because I know you have a lot of witnesses who know a lot more about this issue than I do, who are in the room today for the start of testimony. Sorry about that.
You're all set.
And so I'll just get going here and share my screen.
Yep.
All right. So the bill does a couple of things in our towing statutes. So the first thing it does is currently, the law provides that for towing an abandoned vehicle from private property, a towing service may charge a reasonable fee. And this provides what that reasonable fee would be. So it sets a cap of $130 or $450 per mile towed, whichever is greater. That would be paid by the vehicle owner or the landowner of the property. The next is right now, it provides that in addition to any towing fee, the owner or lien holder reclaiming an abandoned motor vehicle may be charged and shall pay a fee for costs of storage of the vehicle. But it doesn't provide what that fee can be. And this caps that fee at no more than $35 per day. And then finally, subsection C here is completely new. And this would provide that notwithstanding the prior provisions, a person who has submitted a timely report to an appropriate law enforcement agency that a vehicle towed under this abandoned vehicles chapter was stolen shall not be liable for towing fees assessed pursuant to this section or storage charges that accrue prior to 7 days after the date on which a second notice is sent to the owner pursuant to the next section, which I'll get to in just a moment. So that's a notice from the DMV that your stolen vehicle has been towed and can be picked up. Questions on that?
Yeah.
Timely?
So timely is covered in the next section.
Great.
So, and then the other piece here, which I left out, is that related fees, charges, fines, and penalties assessed pursuant to a municipal parking or abandoned motor vehicle ordinance would also not be charged to that individual. So if there's a municipal fee, that would also not be charged. All right, so Section 2154 of Title 23 deals with identification and reclamation of abandoned motor vehicles. And this bill would add a new subdivision A3. that, and it actually, I thought it set out what timely was, but it doesn't. So that may be something to clarify. Apologize. It's been a little while since I looked at the bill. What this provides is that if the motor vehicle has been reported as stolen to an appropriate law enforcement agency or matches the description of a motor vehicle that has been stolen, the department would, within 3 business days after receipt of the form for certification of abandoned motor vehicle, which is sent by the towing entity, send notice to the registered owner and lien holder returned within 7 days, or if return receipt is not returned to the department within 7 business days, the commissioner would then send by first class mail a second notice. And then 7 days after that second notice, storage fees start to accrue. So if you remember that section in that part of the first section. Oh, did we lose the Zoom?
Just popped out. Just want to make sure we are still. Okay. We're still streaming.
Okay, great, no problem. And so they would be looking at potential sources of funding and developing a process for reimbursing the towing services in municipalities. And they would be required to submit a report by this November 15th, which that obviously is going to have to be changed if this bill moves forward. And then their meetings would start on or before September 1st. And then they would cease to exist on December 31st. I always create a delayed date for when the committee ceases to exist in case they don't finish on time. So, and that is it. Oh, it's also, I should note, a delayed effective date on the towing chart. The provisions in the abandoned motor vehicle statute would be a 1-year delay to allow this report to come out and for legislative action to happen on reimbursement before those changes are made. So again, if you decided to move this next session, you'd want to bump all those dates out by at least a year.
So I don't necessarily have a question. I just wondered about like setting the stage before the witnesses.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. But any questions for Damien first? No questions, fairly straightforward. Thank you. Yeah, Barbara.
So many of you know I've been working on consumer towing reforms for many years. That came to my attention from my work on the Parallel Justice Commission, which is the part of the Burlington Community Justice Center. And in recent years, the victim advocates on the Community Justice Center staff, as well as
Now it's on and now I'm in.
as well as Jen Pullman, have brought to my attention that a number of cars were getting stolen, and insult to injury, they were getting these gigantic towing and storage charges that they were expected to pay. And so one of the strategies that I promised was that I would introduce a bill just to deal with this issue, because towing reform is taking a very long time. And in the meantime, there's a lot of people who you will end up getting to hear from. One victim, which we're really grateful that she's willing to talk with us, as well as some of the staff are going to talk about some of the other victims that they've worked with. The other thing is there are at least 2 states, and I just sent Nate the info that he'll post. 2 states have passed laws to address this issue, Illinois and Colorado. Colorado passed it in 23, Illinois passed it in 24. They have different mechanisms for how these reimbursements are funded. There are a number of municipalities. I also listed a few of them on a sheet. So I'm thrilled that our chair was willing to co-sponsor and have a hearing on this because it is mentioned at every Community Justice Center meeting, and it has been an issue stated. So.
Thank you. And are you good with the order of witnesses?
If they are, I know people have time constraints.
Yeah, no, I think
Yeah.
we'll keep track of the time.
Okay.
constraints, but I think we're probably good. So why don't we start with Jennifer Pullman then? Thanks. Thank you for being here. Good to see
Good
you again.
afternoon. Yes, I hadn't planned to be here this late. I'll need to just end it.
You're so
You know,
excited.
I think you would get agreement by everybody
I'm
in this
sure.
room. So
So, good afternoon. For the record, my name is Jennifer Pullman. I'm the director of the Vermont Center for Crime Victim Services, and I'm actually going to testify in my usual hat, but also as a Vermont resident, because I've seen the other side of the coin as a happy-ish ending, but other side of the coin. On this issue, we've been involved for a couple of years because, as you may recall, we operate the Victims' Compensation Program. So we have many victims who come to us thinking they're going to be able to get support. Sometimes it's strictly for a motor vehicle crime, a stolen vehicle, operation without consent, some other piece. Those are not eligible crimes. Other times it's a domestic violence case, for example, and we've spoken about that in H2 22, where we realize that vehicles can sometimes be that almost used as a weapon and be taken away from a victim survivor and used in a situation, abandoned, wrecked, then towed. So, for us, it's a troubling situation, but we don't have any resources for them. And I'll speak to those situations in a little bit. But first, the irony, because again, I've been working with Representative Rachelson, my colleagues who are on the screen, about the fact that, what happens when this takes place and what are we looking at for losses to a victim survivor. So it was really startling to wake up this past Thanksgiving morning and go out to my car and well, my son's home. And we've been hearing rumblings in the neighborhood about people going through cars in Richmond. I live in the Village, lived there for over 23 years. Hadn't ever locked my house. We never locked our cars. But we'd heard rumblings, so we started to change that 23 years of learned safety. Old habits die hard. And my son was home from college. And I actually thought when I was going to bed that night, I was like, shoot, I didn't lock my car. But I thought, who actually would go out the night before Thanksgiving and break into people's cars? Well, we don't know who, but the entire neighborhood was hit. And when I didn't see my son's car there that morning, I thought, oh, he was out with his friends. He probably is still there. And then my neighbor knocked on the door and they said, what happened to Ava's car? That's my daughter who's 18. They had left all her doors open, had gone into her car. And then I said to my girls, I said, is Andrew home? And he was home. And his car had been stolen from our driveway. And so that was challenging to deal with on Thanksgiving. And then, we called the police, did all those different pieces. And then he got the call 3 days later from the police. And he said, Mom, they found my car. And I was like, oh, honey, oh, honey, it's not that easy. And the good piece of news was he said that Rod West from Black Fork Towing had it. Now, Rod has been, everyone in Richmond wants him to run for something because he is the best person in the world. And he is on speed dial on my phone. My family has relied on him from everything from, when I've blown out a tire on the way to drop my daughter off at camp. And he's like, first, Jen, let's get her off to camp. Then we'll come back and deal with your car. So here's Maddie showing up to camp in a tow truck. So he's pulled out a car out of a pond. He's just been that person. So I said, okay, I'm going to call Rod. And I said, Rod, can you just tell me what I'm dealing with? He also knows who I am. So he said, yes, Jen, I've got it. And I said, what are we dealing with? Can you just tell me so I can prepare my son? He's like, that's not good. He's like, there's no syringes in the car, but they had a lot of fun with it. And it's not good. So we showed up at his yard, literally his yard. And, we looked at the car and he refused to take anything from me. Like, you went out, you got the car. He's like, Jen, I'm not charging you for this. I'm not charging you for this. And the irony of all ironies was that the officer who was present while they were gathering evidence from my son's car, he says to me, because I said, I don't have collision. I've been raising my kids on my own since my husband died, and I did the penny wise, pound foolish thing. And I was, I don't have collision, because I always taught my kids, if you do something wrong and your car is damaged, you're responsible for it. So when I told the officer that, he said, oh, don't worry. There's a fund that helps victims in these situations. And I said, I laughed and I said, that's actually my program. No, we don't help victims in these situations. So, when I think about the takeaways from my story, because I never thought I'd be on the flip side of this issue, was that, yes, there are those fees on top of the loss. And I finally am just able to repair my son's car. But there are those fees, there are those storage fees. And those are pieces that think about kind of crimes that come before us or people who are looking for comp because a well-meaning officer said, don't worry, they can help you. They can't. I also think about the means that we did have. It was not our only car. We live in a mostly rural state. And when it's your only opportunity for transportation, and I could use, my daughter still had her car. I had my car. It wasn't our only piece. And Andrew did go back to college and didn't need his car. So for us, it wasn't life-changing. In a lot of ways, it changed the way we viewed our neighborhood and our safety, but it wasn't life-changing because people could still get where they needed to go. Comp can't cover it. We don't have the resource to do that. I wish we would. There's no program in the entire state that would provide this kind of support for victims in stolen car situations. And then the final one is that there are people like Rod who are just give you the shirt off their back. And just, again, so it's the kindest person who has helped our family out so much. And so when I think about this bill and I think about the conversation, and I hope you'll tell Rod how awesome he is. But I think about this as an opportunity to really bring people together because I don't believe, sometimes that can be called cynical, I don't believe anybody wants to be causing additional stress to victims and survivors. But I also believe that there is that balance in terms of how we can think about how we move forward in terms of, inviting the conversation to the table. What are those funding sources? What are those options for us? We know Colorado has already put this in place, Illinois, and as you heard from Representative Rachelson, there are other places that have taken this on. So I think this is a really great opportunity. As far as other stories, we've heard situations where compensation, we've been contacted because there was an elderly person who relied upon his car to get his medications. He didn't have that car because it was stolen and then brought to Vermont and used to commit other crimes. So it was impounded. And so that's a piece that for me, it's like, how can we work in those situations together? Recently, there was a situation where a victim's car was stolen by her ex-partner. She was forced into the car at gunpoint, forced to drive. The car was used to commit a crime, eluding an officer. The car was shot up, an officer was shot, and that car was also towed and stored. There are DUI cases that we get, eluding police, as a homicide. So I'm just thinking about these cases where there's there's loss and then there's this financial piece. And I think that bringing people together to have that conversation about how we can do this would be really important. Certainly I support the conversation in terms of a policy matter and support the concept. And as far as the actual bill itself, I'm not going to speak obviously to within section 1 sub A and sub B. Those are the fees that I'm going to stay in my lane. I certainly have no knowledge of what that would look like or should look like. I did pick up in terms of the piece around Representative Goodnow noticing the timely, and I actually had it in my notes, so I didn't just cheat off of you, but I did want to understand what that meant. And then as far as fee itself, again, I absolutely support that that needs to be the conversation that the work group has. I'm really hesitant to, when I think about Rod, I'm really hesitant to have the conversation or legislation in C until we all can get together and talk about what this would look like in terms of how we can fund this model. So I think the model needs to exist. I believe that strongly, but I don't want to see us jump forward with C. Again, these pieces that I do support until we can figure out how we are supporting those folks who are often just called to do, they're called out to tow the cars. So, I don't know if they have choice in that matter, but someone has to do that. So I think, again, this working group is really where I land as far as the heart of the bill. I do think that the notice provisions, though, in section 2 are very important. I think oftentimes, especially when the car has been stolen and, we hear that they didn't even know. Victim survivor didn't even know until like 4 or 5 days later. And by then you already have those storage pieces. I was lucky that, again, Rod, he was like, oh, shoot, when he said, when I saw this car, he's like, oh no, I know this car. So I was lucky, but I think about people that don't. So I think those notice provisions are important. I don't see that as impeding any or overlapping with any conversation that the work group will be having. So for me, again, the heart and soul is the work group. The one piece I did want to mention was in the working group. In terms of that membership piece in sub B, I did think it was important to have a representative from the Vermont Towing Association, because if we're going to move the conversation forward in a constructive manner, to have them as a part of helping to inform what that would look like, felt like that made sense to me, because I want to see change. I believe everybody would like to do something differently, but again, we have to involve everybody at the table. So for me, that would be my suggestion, other than, again, fleshing out what timely means, and then making sure that they are added to the working group.
So just one quick question. To explain why the victim's compensation can't compensate these costs.
Generally, we only are, as again, with every other compensation program, certain crimes are eligible. They usually are crimes that involve violence on a person. And they are not just every single crime. So for example, stolen vehicles, a straight DUI, if there's no harm to a person, those kinds of crimes are just not compensable. We don't.
State or federal law?
Federal. We do not do property crimes. But there are certain property expenses that we can cover. For example, as I've spoken, if somebody's license is taken, hearing aids, classes, things that somebody needs to basically live that are taken out of their car, we can cover that. If a windshield is smashed when a domestic violence victim is fleeing the scene, we can cover that. So they're very discrete places that we can cover that. As you also may remember, I testified that our fund is facing a $500,000 deficit. So even if state law were to change that, we would not get any reimbursement from the federal government, and we would be out just our special funds. Currently, we do get a 60% reimbursement from the federal government for what we spend in state special funds. We would be out that money completely.
Okay, and then, okay, I think I understand. Yeah, Coach.
What about insurance differences? So in the case where, let's say, the insurance company covers, replacement of glass. But where's that separation? You guys help pick up any additional charges that there might be? What?
Well, unfortunately, on all of our compensation by statute, state statute, is we are last payer. So even in a situation where a victim has damages that we would cover, we are currently required to ask them to submit to their insurance, which
All of those pieces first.
I have personal concerns about in terms of what it means for somebody to be a victim of crime and have to go through their insurance.
Yeah.
But my staff hopefully are not watching, so.
Well, last time I got my, window shut out, that's what ended up happening.
I'm sorry that happened.
Well, occupational hazard.
Are you good, Coach?
Yeah.
Ian?
Would the complaining witness get access to restitution at the resolution of the criminal case?
Yes, they can. As I informed my son, I was like, they're not gonna find anybody and we're gonna eat the money.
Yeah.
So, and that's exactly what happened, even though they stole his cards and he got that recovered. But he was on camera. They were on camera using it, but they couldn't identify who the people were. So restitution, as you may recall, involves the actual conviction. So you have to find that person, bring them to trial, or have a plea agreement where that is the case. So that's an additional burden in a waiting time for victim survivors because compensation is probable cause. So you can get that within 30 days, even if somebody's not identified. Restitution, we all know with the backlog, that could take a couple of years.
Yeah. So there's like a federal restriction on what we can compensate victims on the outset. But as far as what we're allowed to order restitution on, I understand at the conclusion of a criminal proceeding, we have more leeway on what we can order restitution on.
Yes, it's any loss.
Any
So
loss.
restitution, if the judge orders it, then it is something that can be provided to the victim.
Yeah.
And with the fund, we can do that within 30 days if it's to an individual.
Because the restitution money comes out of that same fund.
Well, it's a separate one.
Oh.
It's 15% on the surcharge. So under 137282, the DB and SV fund and comp fund split like the actual dollar amount of $47 between them. And then restitution on top of that is 15%. But as you all know, the surcharges are not really generating very much in terms of revenues.
Yeah.
And I don't want to miss in terms of what the federal government can cover. We're not bound by that, but in terms of us being able to draw down additional federal funds to support what we use for our special funds, again, whatever we spend, if it's within their criteria, we can draw down 60% to reimburse. So if we were to go outside as a state, we could do that. But I would really ask that this body would consider additional revenue sources because we are currently not in a good space, even with the parameters we have.
That's very helpful to understand because I think maybe my question to you would be like, I think under getting a sense for this issue, there's a part of at least me that's thinking maybe we should just have this be something that we can allow victims to basically access the victim compensation fund for. And that way it's sort of like, it seems like a fix that, but it's, I guess my question would be, it sounds like that's not as simple of a fix because of that, how we access potential federal funding.
Well, we've spun this around, Representative Rachelson and myself and other colleagues about what could this look like? And if there were to be a separate fund established in some other way, and again, this would probably be the working groups in the working group's purview, I do think our staff are used to doing this work. They are victim centered, they're trained, and they know how to do that verification piece. They know how to do that research because we don't just hand the money out. We also are just like, can we have the bills? Can we have those pieces? So I do think that would be a natural landing spot for that, but it's certainly not something that we could take on right now. I wish we could. I wish every time a victim picked up her phone, we'd be like, yep, we got you.
Yeah.
But that's not the case right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions for Jim? So just one question for you and probably also for Chris, and we'll have Chris next because I know he has a time commitment. Is if we ask really nicely, will this working group maybe work in the off session and come back at the end of this year since we can't pass this bill and make it work that way?
Can you do that?
Yes, we can ask nicely.
I am very happy to have a conversation. I'm very
To
happy.
ask nicely, you can be, hostile asking. You never get anywhere with that. Use honey and
The
stuff.
honey is that the vinegar. Okay.
Is that what it is? Yeah.
I'm certainly very willing to have that conversation. I think it's a really important one, and I do believe that having that space to do that, I think that we could come back with some good ideas. I believe that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so just gonna jump to Chris, because I know that you have a hard stop and wanted to find out if we can ask you nicely as well, if you know, agree to meet in the off session without us having put it in. But over to you, Chris. Please identify yourself for the record.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christopher Curtis. I'm the Director of the Consumer Assistance Program at the Office of the Attorney General. Happy to appear before your committee again. It's been a little while, but not too long, I hope. And this is an issue that is near and dear to my heart because, as you may recollect, our office, and I was the lucky winner to help General Clark prepare a report on towing practices in Vermont that was issued fairly recently, January of 2024. So that was a really useful exercise for me to better acquaint myself with the various challenges and opportunities that exist within the industry. A really good opportunity to actually work with industry. There are members represented in the room today. And I found it to be a very frankly positive and constructive working experience. So we did issue recommendations that touch on the issue that's before your committee, not specific to crime victims per se, but just in general. And in particular, what your committee is being asked to look at are some standards and some additional regulation for victims of crime for non-consensual tows of their vehicles after they've been abandoned. So I'm familiar with the topic. The report sort of speaks for itself. So I just encourage members of your committee, if you haven't had an opportunity to see that or review it, we can either provide it for you. It's also posted, I think, already on the legislative website. So that's a good starting point as a primer. And there is a very exhaustive 30-page appendix with a multitude of statutory and jurisdictional references to all the other states in the country. So sort of what they're doing in this area, generally speaking, with respect to specified limitations on charges, on storage fees, access to possessions, all that kind of thing, the full panoply of issues. So that's just a really good opening framework for discussion. To your question, Mr. Chair, our office, of course, stands ready, willing, and able to assist your committee or the members of the legislature in working with any number of stakeholders and other sister agencies on this topic. So that is something that we can absolutely assist with, and we'd be happy to do. It'd be in some ways getting the band back together on this topic, but just in perhaps a bit of a narrower stream. I would say with respect to what is outlined here, these sort of, in some respects, mirror some of the recommendations that were in that report because it gets to the issue of a specified and clear and conspicuous disclosure of a rate for victims who would be, that would be capped. But one thing that's different is it's holding the victims themselves harmless and it's securing the funds from some other mechanism. So I leave that, that is a little outside of our purview as a regulatory agency or an enforcement agency. We're really more looking at the consumer protection elements, which is fair and reasonable pricing, disclosure to consumers so they know and understand what those rates are in the context of how government is going to respond to a public safety issue or a victim's issue. That really is the province of your committees or perhaps a working group to sort of better establish and flesh out what that might look like, what those mechanisms might be that would be appropriate. I don't pretend to have an answer to that question for you today. It's a tricky one, obviously, and there are huge challenges in state government right now for additional funding. So I appreciate that, and I'm sensitive to it. I will say, one thing that did jump out at me here in contrast to our report was as we canvassed the various jurisdictions, our recommendation in January of 2024 was really that for non-consensual abandoned vehicle tows, a reasonable rate might be something more akin to $125, which is already in statute. So one thing that's important is, I think, parity among Vermont statutes, and there's already a statutory provision that limits those abandoned vehicle tows from public spaces to $125. So I just think for parity's sake, I would hope and expect that there ultimately would be a determination that you would want to sync those up, whether it's at 125 or whether it's at 130. I leave that to you all to determine what's appropriate. But I did notice that little distinction. So parity is a nice thing, and consistency among state laws is a nice thing. The other thing I noted was this recommends a vehicle storage cost of not more than $35 per day. In the proposed bill before you, I think our report landed on $25. And again, different jurisdictions treat those storage fees differently. So, but I think there is a range. And, from what we were able to ascertain after canvassing a number of other jurisdictions, that appeared to be somewhere in the middle of a common range. But again, I think you could do with some additional testimony from industry, from the people in the practice. And certainly, we can look for other examples of questions or concerns on the part of the public or consumers. Just for the committee to know, we recently did a search or a canvas on complaints to our consumer assistance program. So we had a little less than 30 complaints over roughly a 2-year period about towing. But not all those were specific to crime victims. And I think there were 2 that I can recall off the top of my head that were specific to crimes and the question about how long the vehicle was going to be kept. And now it was a crime scene. And so the storage fees are racking up on the daily. And am I going to be responsible for those kinds of concerns came up. There was another one from a traveler from, the vehicle ended up out of state. And then they had to recover the vehicle over here in Vermont. And so there was a question then again about the storage fees and what was going on with respect to, the crime there and how that victim was going to get their vehicle back. So this is a subset of, I would say, a common, but certainly not the most prevalent complaint that we get at the Consumer Assistance Program. Right. So it falls outside. Every year, as we do a top 10 list of what are the top complaints we receive. And it's rarely in that top 10 list. I can't recall when it's been in that top 10 list. Usually it's like home improvement is right at the top and retail complaints and so on. Those go down the list of very common problems that we see. So, over a 2.5 year period, if we're seeing close to 30, that gives you a sense of the scale. We get a dozen, a little more than a dozen, perhaps. So yeah, it fluctuates.
Where is that in the list?
Great question. We'd have to pull a whole report to see where it falls. I can tell you though, by way of comparison, we get 8,000 to 12,000 calls for help a year.
So
total. Some of those are scam complaints, right? So that's not really a commercial transaction. It's I'm worried about a scam, or it's a phishing thing, or I'm mad about the robocaller. Probably about half of our calls are just in that category alone. But actual commercial transactions, even then, we're still probably getting, 3,000 to 4,000 or probably 2,500 of those that we actually mediate and try to work out resolutions. So, a dozen, 15, 20, it's not like the lion's share of the complaints we're getting.
How many, you said home improvement fraud was your top? Well, how many did you get last year?
Among the top. Well, happily, we have started just in the last 2 years. General Clark has directed me as the new director to start issuing an annual report. So we now published an annual report that gives all of those breakdowns for the top complaints, the top scams, recoveries for Vermonters, because we want to show people what the taxpayers are getting for their investment in the Consumer Assistance Program and how much we bring back to them. I can tell you that we've moved from Representative Rachelson has the annual report right there. We've gone from maybe $400,000 to $500,000 in recoveries a year to the first year of my directorship, 1.89 million in recoveries and savings to Vermonters. And last year, for the first time, over $2 million in recoveries and savings. So that is the work that we do, and all the specifics are in there. And there's a section on home improvement in there as well. In the first year and a half that our home improvement specialist has been on the job, you've brought in more than $800,000 in recoveries for investing in that position. So thank you, because I know that was something that you all did. And that's helped out your constituents tremendously. So on this issue, we are happy to continue to work with all the parties and stakeholders. I think I echo the sentiments of your prior witness that there are very likely ways to get at this issue. And crime victims are going to be a narrower slice or subset of the kinds of complaints that we receive. One question I might have that you all might want to ask is, from law enforcement, what are you looking at if you're going to fund this? And how many is that represented from law enforcement's perspective? Because they'll have a better sense of like, how many stolen vehicles are there? How many are left abandoned? And so if they have those numbers, that might help inform what this fund might look like and how much money it would cost to actually fill that, regardless of what the amount is you arrive at for what's a reasonable total amount.
Karen.
Thank you for this testimony. So I'm just skimming through the January 2024 report as you're speaking. And so this super helpful in that it kind of outlines things that you found, and you also listed how many other states are, I'm guessing, considering it or that have already passed it. Is that what's listed in the report?
Yeah, I believe the states that were listed are saying they've actually acted in this area already.
Okay. So one that I'm curious about, and I know this isn't in the bill, but I'm looking at this, I'm like, maybe we should add some of these things into the bill, is around the payment requirement to accept all reasonable forms of payment. I don't know if you have more information on it. You just found that was something that was a gap. I just find that really interesting if there are these charges that are likely unexpected or could be, and then it is only accepting certain types of payment. That seems extra frustrating.
Yeah, in fact, I just heard of a recent situation where, again, the consumer was in the unfortunate position of going to retrieve the vehicle, and then they were told by the operator, cash only. And so that's a major inconvenience, and a lot of people expect to be able to pay by card or by credit or whatever they need to do to pull those funds together. And these days, that's just such a common form of commerce. You would expect that, the delay of potentially having to go to a bank or take extra time out of your day to go do that's a major inconvenience. Or if it trips over into another day where you then have to go back, you've just acquired another day of storage fees, right? And so that doesn't quite it seems unusual in this day and age that you would have a cash only operation or a restriction when there's other forms of legal tender that a consumer can offer that a reasonable merchant in today's day and age would or should be willing and able to accept.
And if I may ask another question, so I'm a little bit out of the loop on this, but because there's the Consumer Protection Agency department out of the Attorney General's office.
Yep, we call it the Environmental and Public Protection Division. We have a Consumer Protection Unit.
Yes, a unit. I am curious, like you said, with the home improvement piece, like we've made some advances in that. Are there certain barriers? Because it seems like this is a whole can of worms addressing towing. Are there certain barriers or things that you would be helpful? Like, is the work group a step there? Like, how do you see this moving within industries that we can be on the right track?
It's a really great question. And I guess from my perspective, I look at it two ways. One is the legislature looking for simply transparency and a little bit of regulatory guidance set out in a fee structure, right? Disclosure and certain fees. And can that be agreed upon? But the other question is, over the years, there have been various industries that the legislature has sort of looked at or started to hear more about, and concerns have grown about, like, is this an industry that, heretofore has just been unregulated? And are there some rules of the road that should be applied to create more of a regulatory regime around a professional industry where it touches so many Vermonters? So home improvement is a really good example, because as you know, that went on for several years. There was an effort to sort of raise the issue of what was the scope of harms. There was a sunset review that the Secretary of State's office engaged in, and ultimately a recommendation came back that said, hey, regulation, but light touch. We don't want a barrier to entry, because we know that sometimes there are parties that this is the industry they're in because mom and dad were in it and it's handed down to them. And so licensure seems like maybe a bridge too far. We don't want to stop people from getting into the trades, and we need those tradespeople. But having some registration requirement to know who you are and where you are, and that you have insurance and you're carrying insurance in case something goes terribly wrong. That's good liability protection for you as the practitioner, and it's good for the homeowner. And some other various, some contract requirements, a written contract, something in writing that tells people what's going to happen and what the terms are. Like that was, I think in the legislature's wisdom, an area to say, we're going to provide a little additional oversight and some basic rules of the road here to help both the industry and to help homeowners. Whether this is such an industry, I don't know if that's, if the legislature is poised to go there. Maybe that could be something that, a working group ultimately could try to divine. I think what we had tried to set out in the report was more of an approach of saying, here's a recommended menu of items that we know can be problematic or concerning for consumers. And there are some models in other jurisdictions that you could look to decide whether or not to adopt them. These seem to be best practices. And so you could pick and choose from those. It could be, just one or two, or there could be a full panoply. That would be more the approach where you're saying, okay, we're just going to make a change to statute. A more robust or light touch approach that's more holistic might involve, like, where is the agency that would provide oversight, of this industry? And ask the fundamental question, is it necessary? Is there sufficient public safety or public harm element here? I think with this one narrow issue that you're looking at to try to provide some relief for crime victims, that's a narrower slice of this whole question. And so if you want to do something on that sooner and set aside the question later of whether a more robust regulatory review is appropriate, you could also I think you could distinguish those two things if that was your will. Yes. It's a really interesting area, and I admit that it's very complicated, and I do want to go on record. I said it when we released the report. I think every Vermonter has had the experience that when you are stuck in the snow, or God forbid, you're in an accident, we want those technicians, service providers, we want the industry available to us. Like, we all know that is a necessary good, and we've already heard testimony, there are good practitioners, in the business. And so we need that. We want to preserve it. We want to make sure it's available to people. And that can coexist with potentially problematic or questionable practices, either in a certain instance or by a certain provider. They're not mutually exclusive things. And so how you wrestle with that is a really important question. And I appreciate the fact that you're taking time to try to grapple with that in your committee.
Good questions for Chris? I don't see any. Thank you. Thank you very much for being here.
I need to get rid of one or two.
Oh, you want to ask him?
Yeah, actually.
Okay, go ahead.
And it might, it just seems to me that towing a vehicle, as one would think stereotypically towing a vehicle, like your car breaks down, you call someone, they come and get it. You would expect there to be, I don't know, close standardized fee or something, but in this world, some of these vehicles are not going to be easily recovered. That I know from personal experience, and it's going to take a somewhat extraneous undertaking, maybe multiple tow trucks, out of some of these things out. And is it still the same situation? Or if the vehicle is operable, are we going to have a requirement that the owner actually comes and try to remove it themselves?
It's a great question. And I mean, one part of your question gets to the question of, is it a voluntary tow? Meaning I'm in distress and I'm calling somebody of my own volition because I need help, right? Exigent circumstances, and I'm there and I'm trying to get out of the ditch, or, there's been a collision, fender bender, and we got to move the cars around, whatever it might be. The other situation is when I'm not present and then the vehicle, unbeknownst to me, is taken away. Maybe there's a violation, maybe there's tickets, maybe there's an ordinance, we parked in the wrong place, whatever. So now you have no idea as the consumer, like, what happened to my vehicle? You don't even know if it's towed or if it's stolen at that point. You're like, the car's just gone. And so I think any person that's been in that position, you kind of have that sense of panic or dread, like, oh my gosh, what am I dealing with here? And how do you find the vehicle quickly and efficiently? New York State, for example, has an online registry where when the car gets towed, it's uploaded. You can find it like right away. That might be a really helpful system to have for consumers. There might be a cost attached to that. There's like all this weighing of interest, right? It can be really challenging, but like, there are some aspects to this to creating the uniformity that you're talking about. Like, could it be more standard? Is there a range within which there could standard? Can there be a fixed rate, and then can there be mileage? And then everybody would know what the rule is. Maybe. And then is it different for voluntary than for involuntary? That's another important question. And again, I don't envy you trying to unwind this. But do think about, we try to be thoughtful about how we present this in the report. So we cover a lot of this ground in the report, and we come up with these recommendations based on what other jurisdictions have done, and maybe providing some guidance to you all as you think about these things.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for your time.
So we'll go to Lauren Monaco Eddings next, back on track here. And we'll make sure, Jacqueline, that we get to you in plenty of time for you to get out by 3. So let's start with Lauren first.
Hi, all. Thanks so much. For the record, my name is Lauren Monaco Eddings, and I'm a victim services specialist with the Burlington Community Justice Center. It's awesome to see some familiar faces in the room. Hi, Jen. Hi, Barbara. Thank you so much. I'm actually not going to be doing much of a testimony today. I will be handing that over at some point to my colleague, Hannah Brislin, who's going to go into detail about what our program sees as it relates to stolen vehicles and its impact on victims. I'm here today to introduce a victim of stolen vehicle herself, Jacqueline Hughes, who's going to provide testimony. Jacqueline had her vehicle stolen on April 20th, and through the Parallel Justice Program, which Hannah and I both work with, I connected with Jacqueline to provide some support, and I'm going to let Jackie take it from here. Thank you so much, Jackie, also for making the time to be with us today.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction. So over to you, Jacqueline. You're muted right now. You have to unmute.
Is that
There we go.
good? Thank you.
Perfect.
So my name is Jacqueline Hughes. I am a certified lay leader and interim associate pastor at the Methodist Church in Grand Isle. My situation was I was visiting my daughter in Burlington and was parked across from her house on Cedar Street. I spent the night with her and got up the next morning, and just seemed surreal, but my car was missing. Just kind of processed all of that and realized it was a fact. It was true. It wasn't there. And we looked around the blocks a little bit and just thought maybe there's a prank. Who knows? But anyway, called the police and filed the report. And so the towing piece comes in. They initially, apparently, this is my understanding, there's one company they use for cars that are towed from private residences, driveways, and a different company that's used for cars that are stolen from or need to be towed from the street. So they gave me the first, so you're emotional. I mean, it's emotional time. I couldn't quite believe it. Anyway, we went, well, I went home. We didn't have the car at that point. So it was a week later, little over, when they found the car. It was stolen from Burlington, but it was located in Colchester. So we now had 2 departments involved. When he called me, it was 7:30 in the morning, and he said, we have the car. It's, at such and such an address, and gave me the details. They caught the people driving it, etc. And I said, I will be right in. I will be right there. It'll take me 30 minutes. I'm headed out the door. And they told me then, because I know someone spoke to whether you want to have it towed or not have it towed, if you're willing to come and get it. I was very willing to come and get the car. And he said, no, we have to have it towed. I don't know the reason. He just said there was no choice and they had already called a wrecker. So I headed in to go to retrieve my car. They gave me the wrong towing service, so I had to go to one of them first. I can't think of Splain or something. First, no, that's the one that tows from things that are stolen private property or something. So I left there and went to Handy's. And I guess I feel like I am living on a different planet. I was expecting, I guess because I'd never been in that situation or needed a tow, but I was thinking $100 or so. Well, it was almost $300. So which I had to pay right there. I am on Social Security on a fixed income. That was shocking and a true hardship. But I had a credit card. I put it on that. And then we had to leave to go out to Colchester. So I've now come from Grand Isle to Colchester to the two different towing companies in Burlington, back out to Colchester to retrieve the car. There was a lot of stolen items in the car. What this, I guess, doesn't have so much to do with the towing company, but the whole thing just started with the towing and the stress and the emotional impact of the whole thing. The car was disgustingly dirty. There were syringes and needles and condom packages and food and a ton of stolen goods. And I thought that I would have a police officer there with me to handle all of that. And no. So my partner, he got some garbage bags and we took stuff out of the car and just threw it in garbage bags. And the last thing I wanted to do was drive the car, but I kind of had no choice. So I took everything over to the Burlington Police Department and left it all with them. And went home. And so that was, as I say, just part of the ordeal, because then I got a call from Colchester Police Department asking me about all these stolen goods, not to mention all of the things that I had in there, my laptop and speaker, a number of things were all stolen, my eyeglasses, but there was all this other stolen goods in there, which we gave to Burlington Police Department. I then got a call from Colchester Police Department asking me about all these items. And I said, you need to connect with Burlington Police. I've turned everything in. But this was a phone call I got at 9:15 at night from someone who identified themselves by their first name, not even officer so-and-so. So it was just more unsettling, just a more unsettling to the whole situation. And so the car, the whole, then they put 500 miles on it. It's a lease. I called about having it detailed because I did not want to and still haven't driven it until it is cleaned. That charge was $300 to $400, and they were booked way out this time of year. The plates were stolen, so I had no license plates. I needed to have, in order to get license plates, I needed to have a police report because they were stolen plates. I couldn't get a police report because it was pending until apparently they worked out things with all the stolen goods that were inside, along with this guy's court date. They said to go online. I could do a form myself, which I know is not rocket science, but it was just more of, why am I doing all of this? I was willing to just go in and get my car. And instead, I'm faced with a $300 bill right off the bat, and just everything went downhill from there. So then online, I couldn't get the site to work. And when I called, they said, oh, yeah, we're having lots of trouble with that. You're not the only one. I said, well, I need to get plates for my car. Can you just give me a police report? No, they don't do that piece anymore themselves. So I'm just, it was just a constant roadblock. Every single thing that I needed to try to, tie this whole thing up and move forward, it was just constantly a roadblock trying to navigate all of that. So very confusing, no help. I can't even say how many phone calls between Colchester and Burlington Police Department. Anyway, he had said to me, the officer Philbrook at Burlington had said that there was an agency that would connect with me regarding the stolen items and just, the whole thing. So finally, I did hear, when I heard from Lauren from the Community Justice Center. I guess I can't explain how this just stayed. It was on my mind every minute. I mean, I didn't have a car to drive. Even if it had been detailed, I had no plates. It was, we just had to readjust everything. We were kind of lucky. We have a car, or, I'm in Grand Isle, so we could, coordinate rides and things if I needed to go to Burlington. I have my partner who has a car, a truck. Not everybody has that. For some people, if this happens to them and it's just them with one car, I don't know what they do. But anyway, that was the first that I felt like I had any voice at all. I mean, I said, somebody's actually reaching out to listen to my side of things. I mean, it was right down to when I asked if I could go to court when this guy's court date was. Can I go? Can I speak? I want to tell somebody what this has done to me and my family. And just to be there to, listen and to what's going on. And they said, no, or you can call the court. I can call the court. Nobody could tell me when the court date was going to be. I can make phone calls and find out. But I wouldn't be able to have any say. So I just felt like it was just one, I don't know, just kick in the head after another. And I thought, I am I don't like the word victim, but I guess that's what it is. And it just, every time I turned around, there was some other the little piece of this whole thing that didn't make sense. And that was very discouraging. And so talking to Lauren was so helpful. It was just so helpful. It helped me make sense of things. It helped me see some light at the end of the tunnel. She, offered me what they couldn't help with specifically. She gave me information for other resources that could, help maybe with some of the financial pieces or replacing some of the items. And I just felt like there was a little bit of hope, like, it was, someone was listening to me. And so, and I don't know, maybe some people take something like this in stride. I don't know, but I took it very personally. It was very difficult, and very violating. And like I say, the first step was offering to get my car and them telling me that it had been, or they were about to tow it. And then the expense and then the runaround to get it just all of it. So it's still not over, but I am in touch with Lauren on a regular basis to work some of these things out. And I just and when she suggested this and told me about this happening today, this meeting, it's so important. It's just so important. It's a small, I mean, to some people, $280 is not a lot of money, I guess. But to me, it is a great deal of money, and it impacts my life. And I just think that when you've already been victimized, it doesn't seem like you should be, hit again. That it should be that responsibility. It just seems like there should be some help to get you back on your feet. Anyway, that's my story. I don't know if I may have gotten off track a little bit.
Well, I very much appreciate you being here, and so sorry you had to go through all that. And I'm glad that you are now in touch with the Community Justice Center, where they can give you some help and such. So, anybody have questions for Jackie? Yeah, go ahead, Barbara.
Jackie, I just want to thank you for, I know it was short notice, for sharing your story and telling you that Lauren and Hannah have been relentless advocates of trying to address this and other issues that affect victims of crime, and have been very regularly like, what are you doing, Barbara? How is this? What are you doing? How can we help? We need to do something. So I know you're in great hands, and thank you. And I hope we can do something to ease the pain in these situations.
Well, thank you. I hope people in the future, I hope there is something that can be passed or put into effect that will help other people. I do want to say one other thing. Someone had asked me about, well, why didn't you just turn everything into insurance? But I will say this. I did call the insurance company, of course, and I did file a claim. This was before they had found my car, in case, it wasn't found. When they found the car, I kind of weighed everything, because I said I wanted to, withdraw the claim. The car has been found. There's no body damage. I explained everything else. But the cost, I said I just, would withdraw the claim, because the cost, it would have been the cost of the towing, the cost of the detailing, the cost of getting plates, which would end up being around, $1,000 or less. So she said then my rates could possibly go up as much as 30%. So that would have kind of been defeating the purpose and actually costing me more to file a claim. And for the stolen items from the car that were mine, I would have had to file a separate claim with homeowners insurance. So the cost to me, again, would have been more than it cost me just out of pocket. So it didn't make sense. And actually, when I said I wasn't going to, I'll just withdraw the claim, she said, because one had been filed, the rates may still go up, even though there's no financial payout. So it was just another, I just couldn't win. So I really feel like any little piece of that whole big puzzle that people have to deal with when they're in this situation, if there's any help that you can offer, I think it's really important. So thanks.
Thomas, question as well.
Hi there, thanks for testifying. Much
I
appreciated.
hope none of you work for the insurance company.
No, no.
But that
I
is
just,
what they told me.
I'm looking for more of a personal thought from you on, I know there was no body damage to the car, but there's 500 mysterious miles on the car, plus it
Oh,
was
yeah.
pretty well trashed on the inside. I mean, does it feel like the same vehicle to you that you had before it was taken?
I will tell you, I called because it is a lease. I called and asked if there was a way to turn that car in early and get a different car because I really didn't want to drive it, especially with, just all the stuff that was in there. And there really wasn't. I would have had to go corporate level, and it was a big fight. Because if it's turned in early, it just doesn't work that way. He said if it was a couple of months away, they work that into the next lease. But it's a year and a half out, so I couldn't do it. So I haven't driven it yet. Between having no plates and the detailing, which Lauren did tell me there's a possibility of a place that maybe does detailing specifically for cars that are involved in a crime or whatever, something like this, I guess. So, but anyway, no, it doesn't yet. I'm hoping it will once it's all cleaned up and ready to go. I loved the car. So I'm going to try to let that be the biggest factor and, enjoy it again. So, but yeah, it was when I had to drive it home, it made me sick. And it just, if they were going to tow it anywhere, they should have towed it to my house. That's how I feel. Instead of making me get in that
Thank you.
filthy car and drive it after So anyway, that might be another piece of that. If they have to tow something, where do they tow it? So anyway,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much again. I really appreciate you being available today. So we'll turn to Hannah next. Thank you, Hannah, for being here.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I'm going to sign off.
Thank you so much, Jackie, by the way.
Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks very much, and good luck with everything. I hope you make some headway.
Talk to you
Thank you.
soon, Jackie. Thank
Alrighty.
you so much.
Bye-bye now. Bye, everyone.
Hi. I think Jackie touched on a lot of good points from her personal experience, and I just wanted to kind of provide from my experience. So I've been in this role for 2 years. I'm a victim service specialist with Burlington Community Justice Center, and my primary location in which I work out of is the Burlington Police Department. What I wanted to kind of start off with providing is just kind of like the process from my understanding of working with law enforcement officers when a car is recovered. There's a lot of different ways that a car gets recovered. Sometimes it's just like parts in a spot that it's not supposed to be, like somebody else's house blocking a driveway, and it's picked up that way. Maybe it just so happens that a police officer is doing some rounds and comes across a car that has been reported stolen recently and will pull that person over to reclaim the car. And then sometimes I notice a lot of cars actually that were stolen came to be recovered during heavy snowfall because of the parking ban. And so if the car was like abandoned or left in the same spot because somebody was sleeping out of it during the parking bans, it would show up. How that works is if an officer is not recovering it themselves, and let's say the tow truck company comes along to pick it up, the tow truck company would contact the dispatch and provide, typically it's the license plate number, to see if it comes across as stolen. From there, if it does come up that way, either somebody would dispatch or if the officer who took the report is currently on during that shift will reach out to the victim. And so basically, by the time that a victim is notified, it's already probably been towed. That's if they can get a hold of the victim right away. And so if it's not right away, they're going to have those lodging fees typically attached to it. One of the things that Lauren and I have been working on is if we are able to catch a victim before they actually go to pick up their car, we would be able to direct them to the consumer that Chris Curtis was discussing, that consumer line. And what they have been able to do with the Attorney General's Consumer Assistance Program is reach out to whichever towing company to see if they can get the fees waived or significantly reduced, which there has been quite a lot of success if we are able to catch somebody before they actually go to pick it up. I kind of wanted to provide as well, I think it's been discussed here quite a bit around the impact to victims already. So like Jacqueline spoke pretty heavily on the fact that the car was trashed. A lot of the reasons why cars are being stolen is people are sleeping out of them, people are using drugs in them. And so when you have used needles in a car or anything that basically has possibly bodily fluid on it, you can't take it to a regular detailer. A regular detailer is not going to do that work. A lot of times we have to recommend that people go to a crime scene cleanup. And that can be really expensive. I've heard $2,000. I actually worked with somebody who had a $2,000 bill just for the cleanup alone. And this is also a situation too, where that person had child car seats in the car, which I'm not a parent. And when I heard that it costs hundreds of dollars for just one car seat, I was like, kudos to parents for doing what you do. And also that's a very high number and they had to replace those. And also car insurance isn't going to cover that. They're only going to cover the cost of anything that's manufactured to the car. And homeowners or renters insurance is only going to cover if the car was actually stolen from the property. So if somebody was like, let's say, parked in like a park and ride or something like that, that's not going to help them. If they were parked on the street because they don't have off-street parking, that's not going to help them. And so people are already looking at well over $1,000 just after recovering their car. And of course, too, that's not even accounting for lost wages because they can't get to and from work. The cost of trying to get their kids to and from school. They might have to work with a ride share, which can cost money. I've had somebody that lost out on over a week's worth of pay because they had their car stolen in Burlington. They worked in Burlington, but they lived outside of Burlington. They had no way of getting to and from work. So until that car was recovered, they were either working on a plan to get a ride or another pathway to it, or waiting for the car to be recovered. So there's all of these costs that go along with basically being a victim of car theft that nobody really realizes because you don't think about these things until it actually happens to you. We do have a small fund that we work off of where we can help with replacement of certain things. It is small. A piece of it comes from VOCA funding, which has been extremely brought down over and over and over again throughout the years. And so our fund gets smaller. We also have strict rules that we have to follow with our fund where the crime has to have been committed in Burlington. And we can only help people with that fund in Burlington, like if the crime was committed in Burlington. I also wanted to touch on a piece where somebody was like talking about data. Luckily, we have the Valcor system in the state, and that's going to be the system that's probably tracking all of that data. Since all, if not the majority of police agencies across the state utilize Valcor. So if you're curious about that, I would say probably the governance board for the Valcor governance board. Sorry. I think that is the majority of like what I wanted to cover, since so much of this was already covered. And I just want to commend to the question that Thomas had asked as well. I see this a lot with people. There's the emotional impact, like I call it trauma brain. People's brain kind of turns into a word jumble and they have difficulty with following up. They don't know what to do. That's a lot of times when Lauren and I step in, but then there's the whole ruining the vibes of a car. I jokingly will say to people, you don't want your car is supposed to have good vibes. And this was a violation and it just messes with the vibes. So I just want to acknowledge that, because I was watching Jackie speak and it was clear that she was reliving trauma, because this experience is immensely traumatizing for people, and the aftermath of it can last for months, if not sometimes over a year. That's kind of what I was looking to cover.
Barbara, question.
Thank you, Hannah, so much. I know you have some data, and I appreciate you reminding us about looking at Valcor, but it seems like when we've talked about this, you're seeing as many cases or more than what the AG's office is seeing. And I know we've been trying to ask people to call, and it's like one more call for somebody to make. Do you have any data on the number of folks that you or the Community Justice Center has worked with?
So when it comes to car theft, that in particular, I would say in the past 365 days, I have gone through well over 100 in Burlington. So I get cases referred to me from the BPD, and these are basically recent crimes that have been committed, and for me to follow up with the victims of these crimes. How it's logged is kind of all different. Some of them will be logged as larceny of a motor vehicle. Sometimes it will be logged as a stolen vehicle. But over the last 365 days, it has been well over 100. And I will say that it has gone up. Like, I'm fully acknowledging the reality that this is probably a lot of it, not all of it, because we do have the Kia challenge that we see going around. But the majority of this is probably connected to our housing crisis and our substance use crisis, especially with these substances that are like not what we really have dealt with before. These opiates are just, they're wild stuff. And so people in desperate situations make desperate decisions. And a lot of that has been car theft, to the point that with our victims fund, we purchased a bunch of the club. It's basically you put it over the steering wheel. They're not solely foolproof. They can be broken off with like a blunt object if you hit the center of it, but that typically will make a lot of noise because it's going to honk the horn. And it can be helpful for people. The other thing that we have also seen is like somebody's key fob will get stolen, and then like a few days later their car will get stolen because the key fob was stolen. So I've been trying to cut in between that by giving somebody that club to put onto the steering wheel to prevent the car from being able to be drivable. So I can't say if it prior, so like I've been on this for 2 years, I have noticed an uptick in the 2 years that I've been doing this. Prior to that, I'm not sure how much lower the numbers were. And I will say they're not going down.
Any other questions for Hannah? Not seeing. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
We'll go to Howard Handler next. Thank you for being here, Howard.
Thank you for having me. My testimony is probably going to come from a little bit of a different perspective, but want to thank you for the opportunity. Again, my name is Howard Handler. I serve as Senior Director of Strategy, Policy, and Government Affairs for the National Insurance Crime Bureau. So NICB is a national century-old not-for-profit organization supported by approximately 1,200 property and casualty insurance companies, including many who write business in Vermont. And working hand in hand with our member companies and Vermont law enforcement, we help to detect, prevent, and deter insurance crimes and fraud, including predatory towing. So while credible towers, and there's many of them, provide a critical service, the high stress nature of a tow, coupled with the very competitive nature of the towing industry, creates the perfect opportunity for unscrupulous wrecking and towing companies to exploit vehicle owners involved in vehicle crashes or when their stolen vehicle is abandoned. Across the nation, we see a recurring narrative. Unscrupulous towers will charge inflated, exorbitant fees such as gate fees, administrative fees, and even separate fees for every conceivable piece of equipment and accessory like shovels and eye goggles. So a routine tow of several miles can quickly result in towing bill of thousands of dollars. In cases of stolen and abandoned vehicles, dishonest towers will engage in schemes to evade notification to the owner in order to sell the vehicle once the allowable time to do so has passed. Accordingly, we support House Bill 346, which seeks to set reasonable towing fees for abandoned vehicles and strengthens the notification process to vehicle owners and lien holders as it relates to the possession and location of the stolen vehicle, and establish a working group to examine funding mechanisms to reimburse towing services for costs incurred in towing and storing stolen vehicles. We respectfully request your support. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions? Apparently that was so straightforward for us that
It was a little bit more formal than it was more conversational testimony, which I very much appreciated hearing from everyone.
Yes. Actually, we have a question. Angela.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to, you're correct. That was a different hot take than we've heard so far. And I'm intrigued by the notion of unscrupulous towing operators as part of this picture. And I'm sure it's not, obviously not the whole picture. We heard a really great story about a towing operator previously. So I'm wondering if you think that is, that sort of behavior is the root of the problem, or
No, I wouldn't say that's the case, especially from hearing a lot of the feedback here. But it's a component, and towing fraud is escalating nationwide. It's something that a lot of you all were kind of talking about the regulations in other states and what's going on in other states. A lot of states are now starting to really tackle towing fraud. The National Council of Insurance Legislators, which is a bipartisan group of legislators that are focused on insurance issues, has passed a model law to combat predatory towing. Just an example, one of the in prior testimony, someone was talking about not being allowed to use, having to pay in cash. Again, that's an example of predatory towers making it difficult for the consumer or the insurance company to access the vehicle, because the more barriers they put in place to retrieve your vehicle, the more that they can hold on to it and then tack on daily storage fees.
right. Do you think that insurance carriers have any role to play in improving the situation for victims of crime?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, insurers are already
Insurers,
yeah, insurers are already very involved. It's obviously going to depend on your insurance policy, but in many cases, the insurers are on the hook for paying these bills for when a vehicle is stolen. I understand that the prior testimony, the consumer felt that with her deductible and the costs involved, it didn't make sense for her to file a claim. But in many cases, there are claims being filed, and insurers are getting, billed you know, $5,000, even up for commercial tows. You know, think of a big commercial tow truck or commercial truck. We've seen bills upwards of $100,000.
Wow. And so then I would imagine those claims, or the people filing those claims, would their premiums go up as well? Just like our witness was talking about?
Yeah, I can't speak to, you know, I don't work for any specific insurance carrier, and everyone has their own business practice. We have 1,200 members, so I can't speak to how any one individual is going to handle.
Yeah.
A
It just
claim.
occurs to me that might be, we're looking at the whole puzzle, and identifying all of the pieces. It occurs to me that, you know, if we're going to talk about unscrupulous tow operators, we might name some other unscrupulous actors in the larger picture, but.
Yeah, I mean, just, you know, yeah, I mean, insurance is have insurance, and the rates are, you know, they are regulated
Yeah.
through the Department of Insurance.
Thank you.
I really appreciate your testimony as well. Thank you very much for being able to zoom in. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So that was our last witness on that. And did you want to testify, or you were here to listen to what we were here?
Pretty much to listen.
Okay, all right, that's fine.
I can take stuff back to our members and
Great.
look at things and see what we can do to be on the committee and work with you.
All right, I appreciate
Now
it.
that he's spoken, can you just identify?
Yeah, and if you could identify yourself for the record, thank you, Ian.
Trevor Barney from Vice President of Vermont Towing Association.
Great, thank you for being here and sitting in on testimony.
That was just for my own.
No, I thank you for reminding me. Yeah, Karen.
That was the question I was gonna ask, if we were gonna hear from the towing association. Like, they don't want to right now, but it would be great to
Yeah,
hear
yeah,
the
but-
towing association's perspective on this. I feel like a lot of things came up and were raised, and so, I do not want to put you on the spot.
You're not putting me on the spot.
Nope, sorry.
So you join us. And if you could just weigh in on what you've heard or any concerns that you've heard or.
Oh, you know, some of the concerns of, you know, the lady that was speaking, she had a lot of issues with how it was filed, that she couldn't pick up her car, so on and so forth. Not knowing all the aspects of the tow, it seemed like a fairly fair rate, but it's a situation of what you've got to look at, where you're at on insurance, what's going on. And it is a bad time for these people. So, you know, it was good to set in and hear this and see where things are at. And we have some members on here and directors that I believe were zoomed in, and that we can cover on. There's some things that we can't handle, but it's just like insurance rates going up. Our premiums in the tow industry are high. Labor rates are up, fuel's up, cost of equipment's up. You know, a truck that you used to be able to buy for $60,000 is now $180,000 to pick up a car, so on and so forth. We have the EV vehicles involved, so we have to have a vehicle that hauls a heavier capacity, has a bigger tow rating. There's a lot of things in, but there's good motels, there's bad. There's good restaurants, there's bad. Towing industry has got the same thing. We're an association. We're running about 70 members, looking for more members, but we got to root out situations and deal with it. Other states are having the same problem. I was just in New Hampshire this past weekend at a tow parade and a tow get together for the New Hampshire Tow Association. I spoke to some officers there, and they run into the same thing, and same thing with their association. And other states are dealing with it, so we have to look at the big picture. Yes, sir.
Okay, and then Barbara.
How dangerous is your job?
Job is very dangerous. We're looking at 1 in every 6 days of fatalities. Roadside, slow down, move over. A lot of people not paying attention. It is a very dangerous job. The situation with cars being stolen, different things, our people get in the same situation of they're out recovering a car in a bad area and they get cornered. Sometimes guns get pulled out, people get shot. All of our areas are, we just had a shooting in Swanton, Vermont last weekend on a Saturday morning, right up the street from the place where I was at. You don't know what's around you, but in today's era of where it was when I started, it's a lot more dangerous job than it was.
How many, do you have more towing companies in the state of Vermont or less now?
We have less. We do have less. We have, some of the older generation that just not carrying on, selling out. But it's down. And nationwide, it's going down considerably. We're looking at over 30%.
Now, in your area, where are you mainly located?
Swanton, Vermont.
So
Plain, New York.
So I assume probably in Swanton, you have a little more area to hold cars, where is in Burlington, probably space to hold a car is
I would say so,
a
yeah.
lot more, right?
Yep.
So I'll let somebody else and I'll be back.
Right.
Thanks.
Yes, Barbara.
Thank you. So you have 70 members. Do you know how many tow companies there are in Vermont that are not members at this point?
Well, a lot of tow companies are listed in different ways. But as in tow companies, on our books, it's looking like there's 165, and that was of last year. But then there is other ones that are listed as a body shop, but they do have a tow truck. And we have reached out to see how many were on a rotation with the state of Vermont, but we never got that number.
And oh gosh, what was the other question I was just going to ask you? I lost it. But thank you.
Karen and then Ken.
Yes, Ken.
Thank you for being willing to speak. I know I kind of put you on the spot there, but appreciate hearing your perspective. And so it sounds like the association could be open to conversations and of saying that maybe there are some areas that need some tweaking and updating and looking at those. So in looking at or seeing this proposal, it isn't like, no way, we can't do that, but it's worth exploring.
I don't look at nothing as a no way. We got to look at it, address it, and see what we can do. And I don't want to speak out of place here. I've got a president, I've got directors and stuff, but maybe it comes into effect that if you're not a member of the Vermont Tow Association, you're not on a rotation. So then we have some accountability where we can go back to our members. Things happen like that in other states. So maybe that's a route that we take and look at.
And this is just a pure curiosity question.
Yes.
I've never heard of a tow parade. The tow parade.
It's a parade of tow trucks. There was 85, and going back to numbers you were asking about, is how much as it went down. Maybe it was weather, but this past weekend in Weirs Beach, there was 85 tow trucks in the parade. Usually it's been upwards, I guess, of 200 in past years. But last year I was there also, and it was 136 last year. So it was down some. But it's a tow association in New Hampshire. All of your states pretty much have them. Some states have a couple of tow associations in them, Professional Towers of America, so on and so forth. And that's what we work for. And we invite, it's not just for tow companies to come to. A lot of kids there, a lot of families there asking questions, same thing. So it's an informative thing to take and have. So, and I have a card. I can give you my phone's answered 24 hours a day by myself. I dispatch at night, so if you ever have any questions, I'm available.
I appreciate it. Ken, did you have a question?
Yes, do you mind? AAA, they used to be pretty prominent. They still around quite a bit, or has that dropped way off?
It's dropped way off, and something I have to say is like capping a tow of $125. You're not going to have many tow operators to go out for that. When you're looking at with the rate of pay and amount of time to go do that recovery, And I will use my company as an example. Last weekend, we had a call for a car off the road near Louis Landing, came in from the Swanton PD. We sent a rollback to it, which is equipped with a side puller, meaning that it can pull off the side and almost work to about 60% of the capacity of a wrecker. It was en route. I told them 30 minutes. Everything we have is on GPS, tracking it. 10 minutes in, get a phone call back from Swamp PD. Do you have like a boom truck that could go out there because this car's quite a ways out? I said, yes, we do. Officers are asking for a request if that's going to have to be there to get the car. We get to this car, it's over 70 feet out in the swamp and water's up over the windows. So we brought in a rotator wrecker to hook onto that and bring it back to the road and then load it on our car carrier. Now, just happened to be the guy that was on call and could get there the quickest. Had the rotator at his dispersal, but it could have used another wrecker, but still a heavy was called out to do it, and they did request a boom truck. So, and there's a situation of that car has no insurance. That car had one of them paper plates you get from the state of Vermont. And so there it is. So there is nothing for our company to come back on. That does not impact the next customer that calls in that does have insurance. That is the sacrifice of being in business. But we have less issues in the state of New York with insurance than we do in the state of Vermont. I don't know all of the rules there, starting to learn them, but we have a lot less cases there.
So you already said you're 24/7, 365, right? How many employees you have?
We are tipping over 35 employees.
How many trucks?
There is 5 rollbacks, 2 light duty wreckers, and 6 heavy wreckers.
Get some overhead.
Yes.
So your expenses, all those employees, all the trucks, they don't run all the time. Getting them fixed, waiting for parts and all this stuff. Sounds like you have a pretty heavy load on your back. No pun intended.
We do. We do. And and it's like the other towers out there that are smaller. They struggle with workforce just like we do. You get some tow operations that are running themselves, 1 or 2 people. A lot of hours involved, a lot of overtime involved. And like I said, our premiums are high for our insurance. And and we have to carry it.
Or you're sued. And
Or
you're
you're
probably sued, I would assume, above and beyond, regardless if you don't pull a car out right, or if there's somebody suspects there's more damage because it didn't get pulled out right or some darn thing.
Exactly correct.
Yeah, so, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being here.
No problem. Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it very much. If you have any questions, you got my number, and we can go from there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too.
We just have one last thing to do, and I'm told it's going to be 5 to 10 minutes is all it's going to take. Depends on how many questions we have. So we're not going to do the 183, which is the dog bite bill, and we're not going to do 222 right now. We're just going to have Emily right now introduce us to H492. We'll do a brief introduction. So also before, as Emily's getting settled, I had H105 on the schedule for now because the Senate had it on for second reading and an amendment. So I thought by tomorrow we would have that bill kind of settled. But in fact, it was postponed till tomorrow, the second reading. So I'm going to push that off, and I'm trying to figure out what we're going to be doing tomorrow morning. So stay alert. Maybe a late start tomorrow and a short morning, depending on what I can line up. Such short notice. But with that, Emily, over to you.
Can I ask one very good question? And I understand I came in a moment late when we started up on that last bill. So I just want to know what's the process, very briefly, So like if we vote on that or something, if we go like.
I think we evaluate what a different, additional work needs to be done on the bill. If it was completely ready to vote out, we could vote it out and it'd sit over in the Senate until next year.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's the case. I'll talk to Barbara afterwards and see where.
Thank you.
But anyway, yes, Emily, thank you for being here.
Well, thank
for your
you.
patience.
Of course, and thank you for this opportunity. Like I said, I'll be very brief with your time. Thank you, members of the Judiciary Committee, and thank you for the opportunity to speak before you today. I'm here to introduce H 492, addressing animal cruelty and the penalties for those who perpetrate such heinous acts. As someone who grew up in Vermont, surrounded by animals and raised by a single mother, I understand the profound connection between humans and animals. My mom, despite the challenges she faced as a single parent, we always found room in our hearts and home to adopt animals in need. We frequently took in dogs, farm animals, and others who deserved a second chance at life. I remember the joy of having up to 6 rescue dogs at once, each one a part of our family, each one deserving of safety, love, and care. This experience shaped my view of animals as beings worthy of our protection and compassion. Unfortunately, not all animals are as fortunate. A recent case is a clear example of how some animals fall victim to neglect and abuse. On April 9th, an animal owner was arraigned at the Orange County Superior Court in Chelsea, facing 2 counts of animal cruelty after her pigs were found emaciated and suffering from malnutrition and cold exposure. The veterinarian who evaluated the pigs stated that their condition was a result of prolonged starvation and inadequate care. Dr. Sarah Spencer reported these animals have suffered deeply due to malnutrition, inadequate provision for shelter, and failure to seek veterinary care. After their rescue, the pigs were placed in the care of the Merrimack Farm Sanctuary in Charlotte, Vermont, my hometown, where they have begun to recover under rehabilitative refeeding program and behavioral support. What makes this case particularly troubling is not only the suffering of these animals, the community, along with animal advocates, continue to push for justice for these pigs and for all animals that are still residing at the property. This case highlights the need for stronger protections and more accountability and responsible well-being of animals. Additionally, last year we saw a distressing case where a dog that had been involved in an abusive situation was returned to its owner. After the attention the case garnered, the dog's owner created a GoFundMe page capitalizing on the public's concern for the animal. This case underscores a trend where animals are not only victims of cruelty, but in some cases become part of a spectacle rather than receiving the genuine care and protection they deserve. We must be a voice for animals. They cannot advocate for themselves. As a society, we are their voice, and it is our responsibility to protect those who are vulnerable and unable to defend themselves. The proposed bill is important because it addresses both the immediate suffering of animals and the need for lasting change. It proposes stronger penalties for those convicted of animal cruelty, including a ban on future animal ownership, which would prevent individuals from continuing to exploit or harm animals. Growing up surrounded by animals, I know the deep bond that exists between us and our animal companions. H 492 represents a chance to ensure that animals are treated with dignity and respect they deserve. It will provide the necessary legal framework to hold abusers accountable, prevent further cruelty, and protect animals from suffering at the hands who should not be caring for them. I urge you to support this bill. It is not just about animals. It's about creating a society that values compassion, respect, and justice for all living beings. Thank you very much for your time and consideration of this crucial legislation.
Start with Barbara.
So thank you for introducing this bill. This has been an important missing piece of legislation in our judicial tools. And it's one of these things that keeps getting repeated as well. So it seems really important that we address it. I'm wondering if is there a cost to doing it? And is it something that is trying to think about the process?
Yeah, again, Ben was the legislative counsel who wrote up the short form bill. And again, it is a short form, so the committee can decide how they want to go, if there's things they want to add or change. In my experience, this would, I mean, judiciary costs money, right? And but as far as a cost that it doesn't cost anything that we would set up, but it's more the bill as proposed in the short form is simply the most important factor is if you commit abuse and crimes against animals, I don't think that you should have your animals back. And so we've continued to see cases where people would go to court for animal abuse and then they still, like this case with the pigs recently, then the pigs are still there and other pigs. And then in the future, people can. So I believe that when people abuse animals or people, that they should not.
Right.
So that's kind of the crux of it. And also people have, as I mentioned, the other case that then people exploit animals after getting attention in today's social media world, that you know, people start to get attention for that. And then this person who then he started a GoFundMe after getting attention for the dog. And then the people who were helping to save the dog had to give their money back for saving the dog. Anyway, it was a whole just awful situation. But yeah, as far as I know, and that will be up to you, but my proposal doesn't have an appropriation.
And it seems like since this type of bill has first been introduced, we now have more infrastructure.
We do.
Right? Which makes it easier because before I think we were hearing, oh, like who's gonna enforce this? How's this gonna work? But there have been so many cases over the years that people who have like a dog, like a dog breeding, they're abusing, and then they move to a different part of Vermont and open another one up. Like, so it's been.
That's true. And I, again, support and love animal rescues and have been involved in volunteering and rescuing dogs. But unfortunately, there are bad actors in every occupation. And there have been rescues. I'm not going to name names, but it's public record. There have been rescues, as you mentioned, that have had animal abuse cases and then moved on to have more. And that's a huge problem to me. We do have the Division of Animal Welfare that has been set up and we worked really hard on that. I also had a bill last year, which was signed into law to ban dogs and cats sold in pet stores and the puppy mill pipeline to stop that. And so I believe that in Vermont, we are doing the work to become a state that supports animals. And this is another step forward in those legislative priorities. And I think people, you know, regardless of party and any affiliation, I think my constituents all love animals and have been very supportive of the animal welfare bills that I've put forward and grateful to people who take those up. This is obviously in judiciary because it has to do with if you are convicted of crimes. But yeah, I fundamentally don't think that if you abuse an animal in any way that you should be able to have the animal back or more animals and continue that line of abuse.
Question, Angela.
Thank you, Representative. How I was just wondering in your conversations about pulling together the short form and conversations with advocates, what you envision as far as the coercive control within the animal cruelty context and the intersection of domestic violence.
Yeah, so in my research, and again, if you decide to take up this bill, I'm happy to provide more information and testimony. There has been long correlation of people who abuse animals as well as domestic violence and other people. It's been noted, and so that is something that has been discussed in different states about coercive control. And Ben talked to me about when we were coming up with, I presented him with ideas that I had about after reviewing cases and living in here my whole life and seeing animal abuse in different ways, about a short form bill that could kind of be impactful and powerful that then the committee could then decide what pieces they wanted to add or use in it. And that was a component that he had suggested to be added. And we didn't go the route of, penalty, like if you do this, then you should receive a felony or you should receive, that's kind of not the direction we went. We went instead about not having your animals back and owning animals in the future, and then the course of control. Again, that would be up to the committee if they did decide to do a route different than that, but we did not go the route of what the penalties would be.
Yeah, because I know that we include pets in a lot of our domestic violence statutes, so I wasn't sure if there was something specific. I was trying to look back at.
It's an example, I believe.
Yeah, the rattlesnake.
Oh my.
That one too.
Oh wow.
Oh, right, and just using the threat of abuse to an animal as
Yes.
to
That is a thing that exists, and just as I've been talking since January about the bill idea, I've heard from other members all across the state who have different examples, and one today actually did present me with something that was that, and I said, oh well, you should email in and talk about the example in your hometown of that happening, because that's really heinous.
Karen.
Two questions, one kind of specific and then one kind of about process. So with this, so I see that there would be, if somebody was convicted of that, no animals ever. And is that kind of your stance on it? Would you be open to something? Because my background in restorative justice, like I like to believe that folks can
That's
learn
fair.
and grow. I don't know what those benchmarks would be, but I would say that would make this type of bill much more appealing to me if that piece was there. And then that can kind of go with my other question of process with this is, I'm just going to guess, Chair, that we don't necessarily, as a committee, have capacity to expand this into long form bills. So didn't know if you're planning up during the off session to expand this further.
That's exactly along the question, along what I was gonna do more of a suggestion, but.
Okay, well, I'll answer the first.
How is it?
Yeah, I'll answer the first question. My fundamental belief as Emily Krasnow is that I don't want folks who have abused animals to get their animals back. And I would like to see, but again, I understand restorative justice. And again, that would be, I would support a milder version. If the committee and you or the body decided that that part was too severe and you felt that people after some sort of restorative justice should get their animal back after abuse, or own animals in the future, I would not vote for it. But yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at. And yes, I realize that it is possibly a week before the legislative session adjourns. And I respect legislative council's time. And so when they said how swamped they were at the beginning of the session, I did have this bill ready in January. But because of the overwhelming amount for legislative council, I said, that's okay. This can be a short form bill whenever you get to it, because we have a lot going on, especially in your committee, that is really critical to focus on right now. So I really understood that. And I was like, a short form is fine. It'll get the message out there. This is also for my constituents. This is for people all across Vermont who are paying attention and hoping that Vermont acts for the animals and are really just disappointed in that this has been sitting for so long. And I'm not the first person to introduce animal cruelty bills in a judiciary capacity. And so I knew that when I was elected, that I would continue to keep that torch going. But I understand that the capacity of the committee is limited.
That might be answered. So you're interested in turning it into a long form bill and doing the work to make it?
I mean, yeah, I am completely, I have another animal welfare bill that's in agriculture right now that has not moved, about cosmetic testing on animals. And I think that also needs time and should move, but I'm here to support whatever the committee in the next session feels is best. I'm here to advocate for my constituents and for people all across Vermont where animal welfare and abuse of animals is top of mind, and so I will keep at it, but I understand there's limited capacity in a citizen legislature, which I participate in as well.
So I was just gonna suggest that in the off session, if you're gonna proceed with this, is to touch base with the Network Against Domestic and Sexual Abuse, and I can get you the contact information if you have it already, to see if that second component, because we work pretty closely with them as far as what the priorities are in the domestic violence area, and they could definitely weigh in on that.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I would also suggest working on a long form bill. I think there's probably interest in looking at this next year, and at this point, we're kind of trying to start pre-planning, so.
That's great, and I would be open and so grateful if there's any members of this committee that would like to work on that bill with me. I am just incredibly grateful for your expertise in this arena. Obviously, I'm across the hall, and I'm more than willing to and grateful for if folks in this committee want to work on that.
So I know before the end, I know that Ken and Barbara have both had animal cruelty bills in the past, and certainly reach out to them, if not everybody else here. Ian.
Yeah.
Great, thank you so much. I would love to collaborate.
I was just gonna echo my interest in looking at it next year, and I think my only two things would be, I'd be curious if the course of control actually, if it makes sense for it to live in the animal cruelty statutes, or if it should be or if it already is in the domestic abuse. And then I guess I would echo Karen's thoughts on the lifetime ban, or just to I'm just thinking about the other places where we do that. So when you get a domestic abuse conviction, you have to relinquish firearms for the rest of your life.
Okay.
So there are other places where that happens, and I guess I would be curious to look at that language and sort of what the legislative intent is for those type of lifelong bans on those other kind of things. But I think there are ways to work it in, because you've got already in the statute an aggravated element, so you could probably attach it there or something, or give an option for it. But I think that's the only thing. I'm sure that would be what would be a big part of the discussion. But
Oh yeah,
I think that sort of stands out to me. But yeah, I'm super supportive of what
I appreciate that, and you're totally right. And again, while judiciary policy is not my expertise, my heart is with animals, so that is where the policy came from. But exactly, I think the committee would need to look at other statutes to see how it lined up. You wouldn't want it to be more severe for animals than humans necessarily, or maybe you would. Some people would, but I think you're right. I think that would be the testimony that the Judiciary Committee would then take to decide. But I am not married to anything specific. I think, like I said, the biggest intent was the stories I've heard about people who have abused animals, and then those animals remain in their custody, or they have other animals at home, and that just seems unacceptable to me.
Yeah, and then one follow-up was just and this is just my own ignorance. Is this any animal? So farm, agricultural animal, or house pet?
Yeah, that's it.
What's that?
Right.
Or wildlife.
Someone could have some sort of bird that they captured and kept. I mean, for me, I have mostly worked on domestic animal issues in my time in the building, but I grew up with farm animals and rescue farm animals, and again, there's an animal sanctuary in my hometown where they take in abused animals. And I've been really inspired by the work that they've done. So then I started to think about other animals but that would, again, when I did the puppy mill bill and dogs and cats and the puppy mill pipeline, we focused on that, and people said, oh, well, what about snakes or other? I'm like, yeah, I mean, I personally, of course, I would not, but I understand. So that, again, would be up to the committee to decide how far you went in the animal kingdom, so to speak, in that. But me personally, I would like to see it extended broadly to the pigs that were left starving, and this person now still has animals in their custody that are not cared for, and that just seems not
okay to me. And I think that's our job as legislators to say that's not okay. So a follow-up postscript to my question, because I knew it sounded really familiar, and I looked up Act 103, which was page 27 of last year, that amended the definition of abuse to include coercive controlling behavior and have explicitly listed committing or threatening to commit cruelty to animals that intimidates the family or household member.
Oh, great.
So I'd be curious to know, if the notion in here was to go further or to co-locate in like animal statutes.
Legislative Council suggested that piece, and it seemed good to me.
Okay.
So I had no intent.
That doesn't really make it a crime though, it makes it the ability to get, right?
Yes.
Um,
Eligible for a relief from abuse order, right? So
Okay.
it's different.
Yeah, Legislative Council suggested that that would be a strong, like, not suggesting what to do with the bill, but when we were going over different things that you could do for animal abuse, that seemed like something that made a lot of sense to my philosophy and what I've heard, but I'm not an expert in the judiciary like you all, so I don't know the different terms as well. And penalties.
Coach, go ahead.
So I guess hopefully we're able to get to work on this together in the next session.
Mm-hmm.
You know, looking at, how we've developed other pieces of legislation around, the broad spectrum, of, like underneath an umbrella. Families. Well, a lot of people's animals in some cases are more like their families than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And I would assume that some of this language came as a result of that, understanding, Vermont being, how we are. It's not a surprise. So, I think that there's a lot of possibilities.
Yeah, again, this was just a starting point and I felt like I couldn't wait. And again, the session was very crowded. And so with Legislative Council being very overwhelmed, I was like, short form, we'll get the ideas out there and talk about it. But like you said, I don't have children. My dogs are my children. And I always adopt dogs who have come from different situations where they need some extra love and care. And I think Vermont can continue to be a leader and support animals as well as we support people. And so I would look forward to collaborating with everyone and anyone who would like to work on this over the summer and fall and come back with a strong long form bill. And I hope the committee will have the capacity to, again, animals don't have the voice and we have to be their advocates. And again, I really appreciate the committee's time. I know it's late in the afternoon and you've had a long day. And very inquisitive group, so which is great. I love that. Sometimes I go places just like after it's like a cricket. So I love getting to go to other committees and see everyone and chat about the issues we're passionate about that aren't in our own committee. So, oh, I'm good. It is rather hot in here.
It is very hot.
But again, thank you to my favorite chair for allowing me to grace you all with your presence.
Thank you.
And I always like to stop over for judiciary, not just for the snacks.
All right, thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, so
Thanks, Coach.
this is kind of like an end of the session thing.
Oh, yeah.
We're trying to fit some things in. So tomorrow, I only have something at 11 o'clock right now. Eric going over dog bite bill. I mean, so coming from the Senate, I think H-44 should be on its way. I think H-222 should be on its way. I think 87 is not coming back. So I may be scheduling votes for 44 and 222 if I see it on the notice calendar for us for tomorrow. 105, they're on second reading tomorrow. And I don't want to get into a bill when it's only on second reading. In fact, we're really not supposed to do it till we actually get the bill over here. So I'm already kind of being a little premature on some of the bills, but so that, I mean, do people want to haul some folks in tomorrow morning? I mean, there are some issues that we need to address, but I don't know that I can get people together by tomorrow
We
morning.
can do constituent services.
What's
We
that?
got a lot of constituent follow-up.
We have a lot of constituent services that we can do tomorrow
I have a
morning.
lot of constituents.
Education and health.
Yeah, we have, all right,
I have
that's
a
a great
ton.
idea. The end of the session.
Work block?
So 11 o'clock. All right, then on Thursday, right now we have 10 o'clock signing ceremony on 41.
Oh,
And then
nice.
10:30, we have two witnesses on 233. On the auto, 223, that's what I meant, 223. Right?
222.
Yeah, I sent you a text.
I thought Thursday.
Yeah, no, one of them, they were originally scheduled at 9 and one of them is only at 10:30.
Okay, well, but we'll do it at 9 since we get to come in at 11 tomorrow. Let's do 9 o'clock with that person. And then
Thursday.
so we might be done by 10:30 on Thursday, or we might have something else. So
We could have a committee of conference going on then.
45.
yeah, I don't think it's gonna have until next week from what I understand. So committee of conference has been, I think named for the Senate on S12. I believe it's gonna be, well, I'm not sure if it's been named yet or not, so I don't know. But we're gonna have Karen and me and Tom Burdett be on committee conference, but it doesn't sound like we're gonna be able to meet until next week.
And that happens like during the time that we have committee, so we can go and watch it.
Or it may be time during the floor, sometimes, depends on, I mean, we have to try to coordinate the Senate.
Downtime.
So
Yeah.
it can actually be one more on the floor.
Does it happen out in one of the committee rooms?
Not necessarily, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember if it's an H bill, if it should be here, if it's an S bill, it's there, so it'll probably be downstairs.
I'm gonna be the one covering all the tenants.
Oh, okay. So,
And do we know?
so next week, I am trying to fit in, some folks from Dartmouth did a study over the past several months on competency restoration. I'm gonna try to find where the most likely time frame is that is solid, that since we're gonna be meeting both in the morning and the afternoons next week, but often those afternoon meetings could be like 10 minutes.
Meet on the
long.
floor.
Meet on the floor.
Yeah.
Just to see if there's something that's come over from the Senate to make sure things are moving. So there's that, and I was actually hoping to dig a little bit into data stuff, but I'm not sure that we're gonna be able to pull that off or not, especially if we're gone at the end of next week, which we're all hopeful will be the case.
And what's the floor like this week? Do we know?
Yeah, do you know how long or big the floor is?
Up in the air, day by day, yeah. There's nothing on the notice calendar there.
Yeah, so
Wow.
Oh, so, all right.
But this is also the time of year where things can get picked up, pending entry on the notice calendar. So,
We did with S12.
is that a
I'm not just,
shadow?
I'm just saying, like, this
No,
is.
it's a good, yeah.
Normal.
All right, we're adjourned until 11 tomorrow, for goodness sake.